Hello, everyone, and welcome back again to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Darius, and today I will be introducing Chapter 16. If you missed Chapter 15, I would highly suggest going back, link in the description. But if you're all good to go, we will continue with Chapter 16. Fair warning, there is physical violence within this chapter, so if you don't like physical violence, you might want to skip it and all that. So, anyhow, we will continue on with chapter 16, Hellbound. Darius, I summon you now.
A voice spoke out of the blue. The command that filled the room sounded familiar, but I was still confused by it. I gazed at Darius in frustration, wondering what the heck was going on. I never heard the booming voice before within my room, so why was this voice calling for him? I lifted my head to see his face, and it bore a worried expression. I could visibly see him starting to grow worried, and knew something bad was about to happen. Darius? Who the heck was... And within an instant, I felt a horrible sensation of falling. I could feel myself breaking through the air as I continued falling downward. However, it only lasted for a few seconds as my body came to an abrupt halt. I stumbled a little as I was trying to regain my balance and process what the hell happened. Once I did, I turned my gaze forward to see that I was not in my guinea pig room anymore. I started breathing a little faster as a result of my unfamiliar surroundings. The room I found myself standing in had walls with shelves full of different kinds of objects. The entire wall I was facing was full of various books. The shelf on the far left of the room held different kinds of mysterious weapons. However, to the right, the wall contained what appeared to be scrolls of some sort. I couldn't see what the scrolls were for, as they were neatly stacked within their designated area. Those were the only things I could quickly examine before I heard the voice again speaking to me.
There's the biggest pain in my ass.
I quickly spun myself around to appear at the person trying to talk to me and became terrified. For standing in front of me, behind his desk, was Satan himself. I remember him by his navy blue clothes, rusty skin tone, and gigantic horns that stuck out from the sides of his head. The only thing different about this was that I was able to stand almost eye level to him. I stumbled backwards on my feet, breathing even harder than before as my eyes widened from the shock. I couldn't even fully comprehend the situation I was in. But what I did understand was that the place I was in was hell, and I was currently stuck in it.
Why do you stand there so horror-struck?
Satan asked with a snarky tone. I knew I had to tell him why. I just didn't want to. I wanted nothing to do with this demonic world or its leader. Yet, I didn't have a choice. I had to face this on my own and tell this oblivious devil what was happening. So I began to stutter out my answer.
You have the wrong person. I am not Darius.
Upon his response, he began to chuckle and said,
Nice try, Darius. You're not gonna fool me. You don't even know how many times I have heard that excuse before from other demons.
I continued to stand frozen in place while my body started overflowing with dread. Satan seriously thought I was Darius trying to get out of this interaction. I didn't know how to prove to him that it was truly me and not his deal-made demon. The only technique I believed that would make me get my point across was drilling it into his head that I wasn't the one he wanted.
No, I am serious. I have never been down here before, and I am still alive. I am his protector child. Can't you notice the difference between me and him?
I asked. I gazed at Satan's face to visibly see that he was growing agitated with my responses, so he took one deep breath before he decided to snarl at me.
Darius, I know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work. I can tell that this whole thing is a charade because of the way you look and the way you sound. You can't hide yourself from me. So, instead of trying to avoid this, how about you stand there and shut up so I can talk?
I flinched backwards as he aggressively put emphasis on the word shut up. Taking in his response, I decided that it was better to try and pretend to be Darius to not instigate any more problems. The last thing I wanted to do now is get tangled up with him. He stared at me intently, and I began to feel that same burning sensation that I felt the first time I met him. I hated the feeling so much that I wanted to rip my skin off, but that was physically impossible for me to do. After a few seconds, Satan started to instruct me on what to do.
Quit slouching and stand up straight when I am talking to you.
I quickly did as he said to hopefully make him feel a little better. After I straightened myself, Satan walked around to the front of his desk and leaned against it to continue speaking to me.
Now then, did you make a decision on what you want to do with your protector child?
He said, air quoting himself. I was clueless on what he was talking about. What kind of decision did my demon have to make? How was he supposed to answer it? What was the response he wanted to hear? But most importantly, would this decision go horribly wrong and change my life forever? I mean, he was Satan, so I would definitely think that he had horrible plans for humans on Earth. However, I had to find out what the hell he was talking about before answering anything.
Decision? What are you talking about? What decision?
I could see Satan growing annoyed again, but at least I didn't see aggression. He continued to look at me with an irritated face to answer my question.
The one where you decide if you want to protect the child or kill the child so you can live among the human world. Basically, you choose if the child stays on Earth or comes down to hell and takes your place.
What in the actual fuck? This was insane! This decision was something that I wasn't supposed to have control over or even have a say in. I didn't do anything wrong. What could I have possibly done to even have the slightest chance of becoming a demon? Another thing, how the hell would I know if Darius would even consider that option? I know he misses his family and his life, but I don't think he would ever take that chance. However, I didn't truly know him yet either. So maybe he would have thought about it. Fortunately for me, though, I was now allowed to have a say and decide my fate, so I didn't get the short end of the stick.
No fucking way. I will not be forced to become a demon if this is my life we are talking about. He is staying my protector demon.
I exclaimed, panicked and frustrated at the situation at hand. Satan began to straighten himself from leaning on his desk and rolled his eyes, displaying his annoyance with me.
Are you serious right now? Why can't you just take over her body like every other protector demon does? She isn't different from the rest of the humans. Because that isn't right by any means. Darius would never do that to me or anyone else. Why are you sticking your nose in places it shouldn't be? Maybe you should stop riding his ass for once. You don't own him.
I shouted, letting the words slip out of my mouth. Regardless of my scolding, though, Satan raised his eyebrow and glared at me with a crooked smile.
You want to bet?
He said in an aggressive tone. He then proceeded to lift his arm up and faced his hand towards me. As his hand stayed in place, a light blue mist projected out and floated towards me. I started growing fearful as I didn't know what the hell was happening. But once the mist-like power broke through the air, it started wrapping around my neck as its intended target. Within a matter of seconds, I began to feel a burning irritation that eventually became painful as it continued its motion. I wanted to grab my neck to try and relieve my suffering. However, my arms felt as if they were being held down. I closed my eyes, hunched myself over, and grunted as the painful sensation increased. Finally, after a few moments, the feeling and the burning stopped. I regained myself once more and placed my hand around my neck after everything subsided. I felt some sort of spike poke my hand along with the feeling of leather. So as Satan began to speak again, I brought my other hand up to try and examine what was surrounding my neck.
There. Now I own you officially. Every dog needs a collar, right? There you go. You're welcome.
He was out of his goddamn mind! He seriously put a collar around my neck and called me his dog! This was total mockery coming from a twisted lunatic! What was wrong with him? I mean, he was Satan, so he was already messed up. More than any psychopath living on Earth. This was like slavery. He was being cruel to one of his own demons and didn't even care. He was truly one of the worst evils to ever exist. And I was forced to be exposed to it.
Why the hell are you doing this? Why do you have to be such a contemptuous fool?
I asked, trying to seek the truth.
Because you piss me off and you are still pretending to be your protector child. I'm not pretending. I'm not Darius. Him and I switched before you decided to call him down. You have the wrong person.
I exclaimed aggressively. I didn't mean to sound as angry as I did. The anger within my body was just flowing through my veins and was dying to be released. However, Satan became furious with anger and lashed out.
You know what? I've had enough of this.
And with that, he waved his arm again and threw me across the room. I ended up hitting the back wall as my arms were brought up to my head. I felt a sharp pain crawl up my spine upon the impact and ended up hitting my head from the sudden crash. I then tried to bring my arms to my sides, but they were pinned by Satan's force power. He immobilized me from head to toe. So I became obligated to look forward as he began walking closer to me. I had a horrifying fear growing in the pit of my stomach. There was no chance of stopping Satan from doing what he wanted. So as I was confronted by Darius's devilish leader, he started to show his aggravation.
You have been such a pain in the ass ever since I made that deal with you. And now I fucking had it.
As he was fuming, he wound his arm back, formed a fist, and abruptly landed it into my stomach. I grunted from the hit, and my head jolted forward from the amount of muscle he used. I closed my eyes from the pain spreading throughout my abdomen as I somehow was unable to make audible sounds.
You always have to be that oddball demon that ruins everything.
Satan then threw another punch into my stomach, intensifying the pain, along with my reaction. I felt as if my organs were being smushed into pancakes from the violence. As I kept fighting through my torment, I tried to break from his grasp again. However, I was physically stuck and unable to.
And now I have 13 years of rage built within me because of you. It is time for you to taste your own medicine.
I became frightened to the highest degree and wanted to scream. But something within Darius's body was keeping me from doing so. But remembering I was in his body made me think of a possible solution. There was no guarantee that it was going to work, but I needed to try and do something. Anything. I knew the only being at this point who could rescue me was Darius. If my plan failed, I could face some serious injuries. As I was trying to think, Satan proceeded to give me a punch to the face, catching me off guard. My head was jolted forward from the abruptness, and I knew I had to act quickly. So putting my idea into effect, I started to call out to Darius within my head. Darius, if you can hear me, please help me!
My fears continued to grow the longer Abby was gone. I had no idea what was happening or even why Satan was summoning me. However, I was sure she was scared out of her mind. That was certain. I felt like a lost and scared puppy who ran away from home. I didn't know what to do. How was I supposed to get down to hell if she was in my body? I didn't know if I even could. I was teleported everywhere I went. So how was I supposed to make it down there without Satan's assistance? As I was trying to think, I heard Abby's voice shouting in my head.
Darius, if you can hear me, please help me!
She sounded so helpless and frightened. I knew taking in the sight of Hell's overlord was a horrendous sight to observe, but based on how desperate she sounded, only terrible things were coming from this interaction. Before I could try and call back to her, my eyes started to become irritated and burn. As the sudden heat spread and filled my optics, my sight became blurry and started to show me a visual of myself. My body was pinned up against the wall, unable to move. My nose was bleeding, which indicated some sort of impact or violence. I could see the body's shoulders rising and falling quickly as it was breathing heavily. The expression that was displayed upon my face was fear and defeat. As I gazed at myself as a whole, I heard a deeper voice speak out. I'm gonna make you wish you never made that deal with me. Recognizing the voice, I knew Satan was making that threat. He was the only one who knew about the deal besides Abby. That could only mean that I somehow annoyed him to a point where he resorted to physical violence. As the vision continued, I saw myself starting to speak to him.
I'm not Darius.
And with that, the image faded abruptly and left me stunned. Fitting all the pieces together, I just saw Abby currently in a state of distress and danger. She was getting tangled up in my mess and paying for it. Satan wasn't solicitous towards her and clearly wasn't listening. But what else should I expect? He never listened to anyone. As I stood within Abby's cosplay room, I grew furious at Satan as every second went by. I knew that I needed to act and get myself down there to protect Abby by any means necessary. I'm not Darius,
I said weakly from the punches Satan kept drilling into me. I could feel my nose was starting to bleed somehow from the last hit Satan gifted me. I didn't know demons could bleed. Yet my main focus wasn't on that. I was more worried and concentrated on the abuse that was being laid upon me. With each time he punched, he swung harder and faster to intensify the pain. With each minute that was going by, the thoughts of death kept racing through my head. Everything about this made me believe that I was going to die by Satan's wrath. If Darius wasn't coming down, I was a goner. So I desperately called out to him again through the head. Darius, I am begging you, please!
I call bullshit. Shut up.
And Satan punched me again across the face. With that extremely powerful impact, I became lightheaded and my head began to hurt. I didn't want to lift my head up, so I kept it down by my chest. I was trying to show my surrender, but that wasn't good enough for him. For as I kept my head low, Satan used his power to force it upward, so I was stuck looking him in the face.
And now, to top it all off,
He said devilishly. I knew there was no point in trying to free myself, so I glared back at Satan one final time before having to accept my fate. He had his arm raised and pulled back, ready to fire, ready to drive the finishing hit into me like a punching bag. I flinched my head away and closed my eyes in fear. This was it. I had to accept the inevitable. So as I waited for my death to be sealed, I heard a loud thud and became unbound from the wall. Upon opening my eyes, I found Darius standing in front of me as he was projecting a force field around us. Satan stood outside the protective barrier, stunned with anger.
what the hell?
He said confusingly. I almost shared the same feelings as Satan when I realized Darius was finally down here. He was still in my body, but yet he appeared more like a ghost instead of a being. I could see through him somehow. But yet I knew that I wasn't going to ask about it, given the current situation. Instead, though, I moved my arms over my stomach as the pain still lingered from the punches. Darius carried on to stand in front of me with an aggressive expression as Satan continued to speak.
You're fucking lucky that...
Step away from us. Now! Darius commanded while interrupting him. Satan gave my protector an evil look and obeyed him for some reason. He took a couple steps back as I shifted myself slightly. I could feel the pain in my stomach flaring up intensely. It made my body flinch to try and loosen the muscles. However, my demon must have taken note of what was happening to me and spoke within my head.
Abby, are you alright?
Now that you're here, I will be. Hopefully. I answered back. After that slight interaction, Darius confronted my abuser about the circumstances. Just what do you think you're doing? He asked.
My job.
Satan stated with the same aggressive tone. His fists were still clenched like he was ready to physically fight. However, his adversary kept our force field visible to prevent further violence.
He's being an asshole. That's what he's doing.
I chimed in, giving Darius truthful information. However, Satan became very agitated by my response and spoke.
I wouldn't be talking if I were you.
My body recoiled back from the tone of his voice. So with that reaction, I decided to keep my mouth shut before I made matters worse. Satan continued to stare at us as he replied to Darius's question.
I was trying to show you who was in charge, but she happened to be in your body. So let this be a lesson for you both to not aggravate me or pull a stunt like this again.
That still doesn't justify your actions. It's not our fault that you pulled her down instead of me.
Well, why the hell were you not in your body? There wasn't a reason for you two to switch.
You don't know that. The reason doesn't even concern you. Just because she was in my body doesn't mean that you have the right to not listen to her or anyone you encounter. This should be a lesson for you to not just summon my body when you don't even know who's possessing it. At that moment, I started to realize why Satan really wasn't able to tell the difference between me and Darius. As he spoke, I heard my voice coming out of his mouth. So that had to mean that I seriously did sound and look like Darius to Satan. I must have paid more attention to my thoughts than my actual voice being betrayed from me. But couldn't he tell the difference between us with our eyes? The color of my pupils should have proven that I wasn't Darius. My mind grew confused as that thought stirred in my head. Yet there was still one fact that remained the same. There was no need for this violence because of this mix-up. So he had no excuse for his actions. I was just as mad as Darius about everything and was hoping some sort of repercussions would be given back to him.
The last time I checked, I am Satan, the ruler of hell, the darkest evil around, and not to mention your creator. And I can have any right I want. No mortal or demon can tell me otherwise.
Yet the facts triumph over your command. You have no right over her no matter what you say. She is still a part of the human world where even you have limited control over it. So leave her out of this, Darius said with aggressive emphasis. There's no touching, no talking, no nothing. This involves me and me only. Whatever kind of punishments or actions you mischievously have planned, I will be the recipient of it, not her.
Oh, I will gladly give you any punishment when I want to,
he stated, pausing towards the end of his response. His eyes traveled downward towards Darius as he stood shorter than me. He was gazing through the force field with a curious face as he spoke again.
You were given a brand marking on your arm.
As Satan stared slightly dumbfounded, Darius rotated his left arm up to display the snake and rose symbol vertically. After some pause and thought, he decided to break the force field and brought his arm down to his side. Though he placed it in a resting position, I could tell he was still uneasy, for he raised his right arm to keep me behind him. It was like one of those defender stances that you see in a heroic movie. The only thing was that this was evolving around the demonic genre, rather than superheroes. So you are able to notice things. Shocker. Why do you seem so surprised about the marking? Darius asked after the slight pause. I could see that Satan was slowly becoming upset again, but somehow he kept his anger to himself this time to continue speaking.
I don't typically see markings like that on anybody's arm. Does she have it too?
When he asked his question, I became confused by the tone he used. He sounded just as confused and puzzled as we were about it. Despite that, though, Darius nodded his head without saying a word. But Satan wasn't taking that as a proper answer.
Show me,
he said with his lip twitching in anger. I shrunk back a little as that sentence came out of his mouth. The way he sounded made me get goosebumps. I didn't want to comply to his command. Quite frankly, I was too scared to. Darius glanced back at me and reached his left hand to my arm bearing the mark. He grabbed my wrist very gently and tried to bring it forward, but it didn't budge. He then began to say something in my head that forced me to unfreeze.
Abby, you need to show him your arm so he doesn't get violent again. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise.
Darius tried to move my arm again, and it followed this time. Now the marking was in plain sight for Satan to view. He gazed upon it and raised an eyebrow, confirming his confusion. After a few seconds of analyzing, Darius let go of my arm and I quickly returned it to my side. I didn't want any part of me being exposed in front of him. I wasn't going to risk being touched by the evil serpent. Why the hell does this matter right now? This isn't the topic we are discussing, Darius said, trying to get the conversation back on track. However, his response just made Satan aggressive towards us again as he verbally announced it.
Because every protector demon and child gets a matching brand mark that symbolizes the bond between each other. It binds you two together. That's why. Don't get snarky with me.
Well, in case you haven't noticed yet, I am certainly not on good terms with you right now.
But you know we could be on better terms if you would just stop contradicting me all the time. You need to accept your life as a demon. You told me from the start of this that you didn't want to protect her anyway. So what the hell is the difference if you kill her or not?
I grew panicked after Satan blurted out that statement. Darius didn't want to protect me? But then why was he still doing so? Was I truly in danger and Darius was faking everything? I physically started to panic as my thoughts started racing through my head. I tried to form a sentence to state my fear and worry, but Darius butted in to respond to my distress. Abby, stop. You don't have to worry about anything. I will be protecting you no matter what. As he responded to me, I slowly started to calm myself down as the conversation continued on between Darius and Satan.
Why the hell are you like this? Your logic doesn't make any sense.
Well, let me make it crystal clear. I will not be taking your body or destroying her life. She is staying a human, and I will be protecting her like I was assigned to do. With each one of those words, my panic withered away. It didn't go away entirely as we were still in an awful situation. But he was proving himself to be the good guy. Somehow he was. It seemed like he did actually want to protect me. However, my head cleared of any reflections as Satan tried to persuade my protector off his path of generosity.
I don't think you understand the opportunity you have here, Darius. You have the chance to see your wife and child again. You could rekindle your loved ones and live among them once again. All you need to do is say yes to make it happen. All your regret washed away as soon as you hug your wife and your son. It's so easy. Just one little word, and everything you want will be yours again. That's all you wanted since you made that deal. If you commit to this decision, you can be free.
I looked down at Darius from my height to see that he looked away from Satan. From what his body language was showing me, he seemed to be contemplating upon his remark. However, I decided to chime in and stop his thoughts from roaming too far.
No, he wouldn't do that to me. But he has every opportunity to—
Just zip it! Darius interrupted as he gazed back at the large tyrant. I had my chance living, and it ended because of my foolishness. My life is sadly over, as much as I hate to say that. Especially with the reason being because of you. However, I am not going to ruin an innocent child's life just to chase something that was taken away from me long ago. Satan's expression began to change into his normal, irritated face as he became frustrated at the demon's choice.
You are going to regret telling me that.
Darius paused himself to really think about what to say next. I thought he was going to say some sort of snarky comeback or tell him off a final time. But instead he responded with, "Good." And at that sentence I grew fearful of what Darius was getting himself into.
Darius, no!
I exclaimed. After my useless plea, Satan grew furious and began to stomp over to us. I backed myself up a little and started to freak out as Darius brought the force field back up. Upon that action, he ran into it and threw his hands up into the air in frustration. We both started to breathe rapidly as Satan spoke one final time.
I've had enough of your charades. Get out of here!
Upon that blasted statement, Satan snapped his fingers and we were suddenly teleported back up into my cosplay room. Upon our arrival, we were forced back into our own bodies. As I entered mine, I began to wake up from its abrupt knockout. I could hear Darius was frustrated and cursing as he landed within the room. As my body became fully conscious, I began to feel the pain from Satan's punches again. I brought my hand up to my nose to feel that it wasn't bleeding anymore, but I somehow still felt the sensation of it, and I was still hurting. Despite the trouble I was having, I still grew extremely perplexed as to why I was still feeling the pain. I was in Darius's body when everything happened, so shouldn't he be feeling it? Within the middle of my rumination, I started to feel a sharp tension grow within the muscles of my stomach as I moved. The pain intensified again so much that I grunted in anguish.
Oh, Abby.
Darius said, panicked. As he reacted to my torment, I tried to sit myself up to find a more comfortable position. However, the pain lingered as I moved and struggled. Upon that, Darius swiftly bent down to his knees to try and help me, but became hesitant as he approached. I managed to finally maneuver myself to sit up vertically while supporting my body with one arm. My eyes kept clenching shut from the shots of pain as one of my arms laid upon my abdomen. I continued to unwillingly bask within my injuries as Darius started to talk to me.
Abby, just take it easy. Don't hurt yourself worse than what you already are. I know this may be a stupid question, but besides the pain, are you okay?
With that question, the true answer was that I wasn't fine. I wanted to yell at the top of my lungs about how all of this was bullcrap. All I wanted to do was curl up in a ball and cry. But I didn't want him to know that. So I decided to lie to him and say, "I'm fine. Just a couple of punches. I think I'll live."
But those are punches that you never should have taken by any means. What he did to you was not right or appropriate for a man in his ruling position. He knows better not to hit or threaten a woman.
Silence filled the room as Darius continued to watch me suffer. Eventually, he ended up smacking the ground with his hand in frustration and spoke again.
I was so stupid to allow you in my body. Now you just got hurt because of my poor decisions.
"But Darius," I intruded. "I said I'm fine. At least you found a way to come down and help me."
I know you said you're fine, but that still doesn't make any of this right.
I knew what he said was true. None of this was okay. I shouldn't even be hurting at this moment, but yet I was. With that thought in mind, I wanted to ask him a question concerning my pain. "Darius, why am I hurting if I got punched in your body? Why are you not injured?" He began to stare at me dumbfounded. He didn't say anything for a minute, but eventually spoke.
To be honest, I haven't got a clue. It would make more logical sense for me to be in pain rather than you. I wish I was, but I guess that's not how it works.
With his reply, I started examining his face. The expression he displayed was a concerned look, as if he was worried about my well-being. And as I was watching, I also caught sight of the spiked collar with a pentagram centerpiece dangling from it. Seeing the collar for the first time, I felt awful. If I would have just pretended to be Darius, he wouldn't have that. Darius, I said, breaking the silence after my brief reflection.
What?
You have a collar around your neck.
I know. I can feel the discomfort from it. However, I am not worried about it at this point. I am more concerned about you and making sure you're okay. Now, can we try and get you on your feet? Do you think you can stand?
I replied to his questions with a nod. I was tired of being stuck on the floor. On the other hand, though, my pain was at ease from the lack of movement. I knew if I stood up, the terrible aching would strike again. But yet that was something I was willing to risk to get off the ground. Darius must have read my thoughts because afterwards he said,
Don't worry. I'll help you get to your feet.
Upon that response, Darius began to stand himself up. He started to brush off his shirt and I lifted my head up to look at him. It always seemed like he wanted to be clean and presentable. Given the situation, I didn't think it really mattered. I could care less about the way he looked. I always thought I dressed like trash, so comparing myself to him, he always looked formal and handsome. Who knew even a demon could look better than me? As he regained his focus, he extended his hand down to me. Displaying an open palm, he said,
Come on. I won't hurt you. I promise.
Upon his gentle gesture, I raised my arm to him and he grabbed it. He guided his other arm just below my elbow so he had more leverage to pick me up. Once his hands were steadied, he counted up from 1 to 3 and started to lift me up gently. Working together, we managed to stand myself up. Once he knew I was stable, he slowly let go of my arm. I stumbled a little as the muscles stretched, but I began to slouch and arch my back to loosen the tension. I could tell he didn't like my stance, but I was at least able to stand without being in an extreme amount of pain. Darius started to fix his hair again by combing it with his fingers. I could tell he was trying to calm himself down from all the stress. So as I continued watching him, my eyes couldn't help but focus on his collar again as it was shimmering within the cosplay lights. All of the silver metal spikes along with the pentagram reflected the red and blue lights as he moved. Each piece of metal was displaying their sharp points as they stuck out of the black leather. After a moment of being mesmerized, I decided to refocus and ask how Darius was doing. Are you okay? Upon my concern, he turned his head from the ground to face me again. I could see the puzzled look upon his face as if my question was foreign. However, I thought it was more of a simplistic question than a confusing one. He waited a moment as he closed his eyes in despair. I imagine he was debating if he wanted to tell me the truth or not, as he took a moment to pause. But when he opened them back up, he finally started to answer.
Yeah, I'm fine. I wasn't the one who was hurt by him.
I know you weren't, but that doesn't mean you are emotionally okay. Darius chuckled a little at my statement and instantly responded with,
I have been through a lot of terrible things. It doesn't matter how I feel.
And that is the exact reason why I'm asking you. You have been through a lot, and it seems like all you do is just bottle things up. Why would your well-being not matter in this situation? Don't you want to get those troubles off your chest and confide in someone who would listen to you?
That's exactly the point, Abby. I can't confide in anyone. The word venting doesn't exist within the demon realm. It's better to keep everything to yourself and display a tough facade. I have watched too many people get beaten to death because they tried to confide in others down in hell. It's ammunition for other demons. I'm not taking my chances.
Well, I understand that. However, the word venting exists within this world, the human world. I know of at least one person you could talk to. Darius stared at me in disbelief and crossed his arms.
Oh, yeah? And who is that, if I may ask?
She's standing right in front of you. He paused for a moment, processing what I said. I could tell he was shocked by the way his eyes widened, but he still huffed at the idea.
That's cute of you to offer that, but I'm gonna say no thanks. If you can't handle the demonic changes happening between us, you won't be able to handle my baggage or past.
I knew what he said was semi-true, but I still wanted him to have an outlet for some reason. My heart was filling with sorrow for this demon that I barely knew. I only known him for a month at this point. I wanted to pity him, but at the same time, I was a little angry at his statement. It sounded like he was calling me a cream puff, and that I couldn't handle the reality of the demon world. However, if I was able to overcome the fact that this demon used to be a human, I could listen to what he had to say about his life. You know, for being a doctor before this, you're being pretty foolish, I said after my thinking session. Upon my statement, Darius's facial expression shifted to anger as his eyes widened.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Weren't you taught that bottling your emotions was unhealthy? Whenever I go into the doctor's office for a physical, they always ask me if I talk about my feelings and express myself to others. I don't get why you can't do the same.
Because I am in a different circumstance than you. Another reason is because I am a grown-ass adult and can handle my problems on my own. I don't need to rely on a young lady for that. Now can we please get off this subject before we break out into another fight?
I wanted to debate more with Darius about the topic, but I wasn't in the mood to bicker back and forth like he said. So I decided to cooperate and tilt my head towards the ground in silence. The tension between us started to disappear the longer we filled the room with quietness. The pain in my stomach went away only slightly. I figured it was because of my lack of movement and use of the muscles. So I figured if I were to sit down, it would make the pain decrease as I relaxed. However, before I could act upon that thought, Darius started to break the silence.
If he wanted me so badly, why didn't he just take me? There has to be a way for him to actually summon me and not just my body.
Darius, I tried to tell him that it wasn't you. He didn't believe me and I didn't know how to...
Hey.
He interrupted, placing his hand up to gesture me to stop.
You don't need to worry about that. I am fully confident that you tried, and I believe you. He never should have involved you in the first place. So instead of you having a bone to pick with him, I do.
He exclaimed at the end. Then, like thunder crashing out of nowhere, that same echoey voice from earlier started to fill the room again.
This has been Chapter 16, Hellbound, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune into the next video for Chapter 17. Thank you for listening.